All right, brothers, the last lecture, the book of Revelation or the Apocalypse. Nobody celebrate that this is the last lecture. Uh, just kidding. Actually, my wife promised me Papa John's after this lecture, so we're celebrating. So that's a good Proverbs 31 TPA wife right there, an excellent wife I have found. Now, to begin, I want to read Revelation 1, chapter 3. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and who keep what is written in it, for the time is near. Now, there's plenty of things just in that verse alone that are worthy of lots of time to unpack, including the whole letter. But what I want to just, I want the big aim of my lecture is blessedness. I believe that's God's ultimate intent with this letter is blessedness. It's your blessing. Now, there's definitely warnings and stuff, and there's plenty of other major theological themes, but this is what his outcome is, that you are blessed. And so I'm going to unpack a lot of this as we go, but that is my hope. That is my desire, that as you read and you teach this to your people, that it is a blessing from the Lord. And so I want to pray to that end. God, would you indeed bless us as we understand this this apocalypse? We don't expect to know every single detail of it, but nonetheless, we can still be blessed. And so to the degree that you bless through this apocalypse, would we receive it? Double portion, triple portion. We want this blessing from the apocalypse. And so, Lord, we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. So the book of the Revelation or the Apocalypse, this is exactly how John introduces this book, the Apocalypse of Jesus Christ. And so the noun apocalypse is a compound of two Greek words, apo, which is away, and kalip, which is to cover. So the idea is to take the cover off, to unveil. This is not a describing some code that you're supposed to or to unpack for future weird stuff, right? This is unveiling. This is the unveiling of the symbols and imagery and whatnot. Now, a lot of this comes from Daniel chapter 2, which we'll unpack a little bit as we go, especially verses 28, 29, and verse 45. There's a lot of types of things that come from Daniel, of course, as well as Ezekiel and Zechariah and other texts as well. But Daniel seems to be a big part of what this, where this all comes from. It's where the word originates, or not originates perhaps, but where it comes from, and a lot of things pertaining to the Revelation or Apocalypse comes from Daniel. Now, as good as students we are, I know that you all believe in the inerrancy of Scripture and whatnot, and every word is breathed out by God, 2 Timothy 3. But I also want to propose that the genre by which every book was written in is also inspired by God, and I believe that is clear enough from verse 1 that it's an apocalypse. He's saying point blank, not always do we have such clear indication on the genre, but here we have it. It's an apocalypse. We need to read it by the way that it was intended to be read. And so there are many from typically a dispensational point of view that wants to read out all of the Bible with this cookie cutter hermeneutic of read it as literally as possible, and except for when you're forced into some sort of metaphorical understanding. And so they approach this, but this is absurd. Nobody would read Psalms as literally as possible, or excuse me, poetry outside of the Bible as literally as possible. Why in the world would you read the book of Psalms that way, or even Proverbs that way? But First Kings, on the other hand, is historic prose, and thus ought to be read literally. You would not read that like you would read poetry. So it's just a natural thing that we read it this way. And if God goes out of his way to say that this is an apocalypse, if we're not supposed to read it like an apocalypse, certainly he would have told us. But nonetheless, we are to read this as apocalyptic literature. Now, that's as clear as mud for what that even means, but surely it is not literally, right? We can at least start there, that it is not to be read literally. To read the apocalypse literally, obviously, has led to many people coming up with some bizarre interpretations of what certain things are and what they mean, because it is not so. To read it any different than apocalyptic literature, to read it literally would be to come to wrong conclusions. It's naturally going to lead to things that that God intended to communicate. You will be perceiving this wrong. I would even go as far to say as it is disobedience to read this text literally as possible. Now, generally speaking, apocalyptic literature, not just this particular revelation, is typically full of out of this world imagery. And I do mean that literally, like the moon turning to blood and cosmic wars. And it's typically connected to divine beings at war with evil. But the symbols and imagery are not to be taken literally. Truthfully, yes, but not literally. In fact, I believe that is what point blank John actually even says to us. In chapter 1, verse 1, towards the end, it says, he made it known by sending his angel to his servant John. Right? And so, or God made it known, I guess, to his servant John. That phrase in Greek, or that word in Greek, is from Daniel chapter 2, verse 28. And the word means to make known by symbols. And that's exactly what is going on in Daniel 2:28. God just gave Daniel, or unveiled, the dreams given to Nebuchadnezzar. And he says, God made known to you these things by symbols, right? That's what the whole section is dealing with. And so John says that here. And so he point blank tells us he is unveiling these things by describing them through symbols. So you don't read them as the actual thing, you read them as symbols. This is metaphoric imagery that he is using. That is exactly what John is telling us. Now, perhaps a question you are wondering, or if not, now you are, because I'm telling you, as your professor, that not prophetic, but that why apocalyptic literature? Why did John do this? Why not just give it to us straight? This is what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. How come he doesn't do that? Why is it imagery? Well, one reason is for such a genre is to enhance vividness and rhetoric effect. That's what my professor, Dr. Rainbow, said. Or as G.K. Beale says, so that we would actually see and perceive spiritual reality and not merely listen to abstractions about it and accordingly be shocked. And that phrase, be shocked, is very important. I listened to a whole lecture on Beale on this, and he talks about how, a lot of Revelation talks about the spiritual ears, right? From Isaiah 6, when Isaiah is commissioned to go out and speak, but, they don't have ears to hear. They don't have eyes to see. They're not going to perceive, right? And so this is what... to every single church, he says, at the end, it says, let him who has ears, let them hear, right? And that's referring to these spiritual ears. There's a few other times when that phrase is used. And like for Isaiah, in Isaiah's day, and in the parables where Jesus says, let him who has ears, let him hear, all these things, the parables, the prophets, and these vivid imageries are to shock God's remnant, to shock God's people, in order that they remain faithful, but also if they're backsliding, to shock them back into faithfulness. And so that is a huge purpose behind this vivid language, that it is shocking to us, so that we remain faithful. Yes, there are warnings, and yes, they are real warnings that are connected to this vivid imagery, and that is part of the shocking experience, so to speak. But this is part of the reason why we are blessed when we read it, like I talked about at the beginning. Now, it's not just simply that you hear the words of the book of Revelation, because unbelievers or people who don't have spiritual hearts that are awakened with ears to hear will hear the words audibly. They just don't sink in, and it's not shocking to their soul. They're callous to it. They're like idols of stone who have ears but do not hear, eyes that do not see, right? That is, and so for them, it's a hardening thing when you hear words of the apocalypse to some degree. But for us who hear with spiritual ears, it awakens our soul to this shocking vividness in order to bring us back to himself. And so in that way, it is a blessing when we hear with spiritual ears to hear. Now, we're going to go really high up in the air and look at Revelation from a bird's eye view. And we're going to be looking at structure of how the book, the Apocalypse, is laid out, and how it's connected to the overall redemptive history from dawn till the end. So this is a very high bird's eye view, and we're going to do this from Revelation chapter 1, verse 19. Now, in Revelation 1, verse 3, verse 19, chapter 4, verse 1, 22, verse 6, all has this similar language of talking about things that must take place after this. And much of this most likely comes from Daniel chapter 2, verse 28 and 29 and verse 45. And there's debates over the varying degree by which John is actually, is he just quoting that? Is it just using that phrase? Or is it really supposed to link us back to Daniel and the whole structure and how the whole narrative is put together? Nonetheless, there are varying views of chapter 1, verse 19. Let me read this for us. Right, therefore, this is the ESV, right, therefore, the things that you have seen, those that are, and those that are to take place after this. Now, it's not a verse that you look at and be like, well, do we really need to spend that much time on this? But nonetheless, it's actually been a very big point of contention throughout the ages. And so let me just, most dispensationalists and many premillennialists see a threefold approach to this verse and how it pertains to the whole of the book and all of redemptive history. So yes, this is a very important verse. And so the things that you have seen is equal to the already written in this, what has already been written in this letter, namely the vision of Jesus, the Son of Man. And then those that are is chapters 2 through 3, the current church age, and what they would say is not just simply chapters 2 through 3, but all of the church age, all the way up to the Great Tribulation, which, pending on whoever is thinking about this, their view of the rapture, if that is their cup of tea. And then lastly, those that are to take place after this, chapter 4 to the end of the book. This is referring to the very final end of history until Jesus's final coming to conclude history. So that would be their view of structure to the book, as well as the flow of all of redemptive history. It's this compartmentalized of the things, the past, present, and future. And that's how Revelation, the Apocalypse of John, is to be thought of. In contrast to this view, which I would be contrast to that view, William Mounce translates this verse, right, therefore, the things you are about to see, that is both what is now and what lies yet in the future. So in this view, the apocalypse isn't contained to these three units, past, present, and future. Rather, right, what you see is referring to the whole apocalypse. And the whole apocalypse is about the already but not yet fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies concerning the latter days, which, of course, even in John's day had already begun, right? We know this. We've rehearsed this from Acts effects, and the prophecies of Joel that the Spirit is poured out on flesh. It's the mark of the end times. John chapter 2, there's this, Antichrist already here that tells us that it's the final hour, right? So we're already in this. And so this is the book of Revelation then is this whole apocalypse of describing the already but not yet kingdom and the events of the last hour, the last days. Now, following Mounce's train of thought, and then sprinkling in a whole lot of G.K. Beale, who perhaps, many would say that he's taking this too far in his connection to Daniel chapter 2, verse 28 and 29, and verse 45, on how this all pertains to Daniel. But given that this is seemingly taken from Daniel 2, 28, 29, and 45, and the fact that chapter 1, verse 19 of the Apocalypse is just right after the Son of Man passage, right? It's hard not to assume that that is what John has in mind, or at least what God is inspiring John to see in this vision. So we just get done with this vision of the Son of Man, and that, of course, reminds us of Daniel chapter 7, where he is from the Ancient of Days, and he is and his kingdom will be global, and it will have no end. It will be eternal. And so this Son of Man has come. He's in the midst of the lampstands, which of course is the church, and that's significant because they're the saints. And later on in the prophecy of Daniel 7, when the angel is interpreting this vision that Daniel has, he says the saints will have this kingdom that is eternal and will have the whole world. And so Jesus is the Son of Man, of course, and he is in the midst of the lampstands. And so I believe that we can say that Revelation is kind of like this update on the progression of this prophecy in Daniel chapter 7, because we know, from Daniel chapter 7 with the Son of Man coming, right? We already know John is living after the Persians defeat the Babylonians, the Greeks, and then the Romans, right? What's left other than the Son of Man to come, and he is therefore there. Therefore, things are on their way. This kingdom is ratified. It is coming. And so he's giving this update on the vision set forth by Daniel, that things are inaugurated. Things that were still yet in the future, the distant future for Daniel, is now on the doorstep. It is at hand. This is why in verse 1 and verse 3 and many and other places it talks about the time is near. Right? The things of Daniel are here. Things are at hand. In fact, they are already inaugurated. And so I'm, of course, getting into the theological strands of this and everything, but that affects how the flow is. But really, I have to take it a bit further. I've already gone this deep. Son of Man from Daniel 7 actually comes clear back to Psalm 8, where the Son of Man, what is man that you are mindful of him? The Son of Man that you care for him. You made him a little lower than the angels, crowned him with glory and honor, and you made him ruler over your creation, the works of your hands, right? All the animals and everything else, right? That is actually an allusion in part to Adam, because he was the one who was crowned with glory and honor and thus made a king. And of course, he botches it. And so therefore, there's this echo of Adam that points forward to a last Adam, a son of man, a son of Adam, who is going to come and be made a little lower than the angels, be crowned with glory and honor, have complete dominion over the works of God's hands, right? This, of course, is Jesus. And so this whole book of Revelation spans the whole Bible. This is everything. The first Adam fails. They were supposed to be this kingly, priestly, missionary and have dominion over all creation. They fail, which paves the way for Satan to come in. Now we see finally there's these prophecies of a son of man to come from Psalm 8, and therefore it's coming closer in Daniel 7. Finally, he is here as depicted in Revelation chapter 1, that the Son of Man is in the midst of the churches, is in the midst of the lampstands. I love this stuff, if you can't pick up on that. But man, this is... I know I'm talking about bird's eye view of structure here, but I couldn't do it without talking about the bird's eye view of all of redemptive history, because that's what this all is. It is all of God's redemptive history in this apocalypse. However, honing my own self back in, I believe Mounce is correct in talking about chapter 119, writing the whole of the apocalyptic vision, and the things that are, things that are and the things that are to take place is in connection to the already but not yet fulfillment, the inaugurated for fulfillment of Daniel 7 and really all of the prophecies of the Old Testament. They are all inaugurated in Christ and bringing forth the last days. And so this is already but not yet flow of the whole thing. So it's not that everything fits in this nice, neat package of past, present, and future. I mean, not even dispensationalists can say that about the future unless they believe that Mary is going to give birth to Jesus again in chapter 12. That's over the top, I understand. But not everything is in this nice, neat package. All right, so there's the bird's eye view. For whatever it's worth, answered a lot of key theological issues as well at the same time. But zooming in, like if you think about Google Earth, you can zoom in just a little bit at a time. We're going to zoom in just a little bit on structure. And we're going to be thinking a little bit more about the categories within the book of Revelation. Now, on your handout, you have a little chart that kind of looks like an arrow going up like this with different words on it. But this is taken from my professor's book, Pith of the Apocalypse, which is a really great book to have. It's a small book that's just really about helping you begin looking at the book of Revelation. But don't you want a book on your shelf called Pith of the Apocalypse? I mean, come on. That's a great great book. I think Ryan Franchuk actually wanted to start a hardcore band called Pith of the Apocalypse. I'm pretty sure that's accurate. Maybe I'm wrong. He can fill us in later. But this is how it works. At the top of this chart is the heaven, the God and the Lamb in heaven in chapters 4-5. This is not the exact numerical center of the apocalypse, but it is the theological center of the apocalypse. You think about the churches and all the struggles that they have depicted in chapters 2-3. Man, isn't it a beautiful thing that the next scene is heaven, the risen Lamb, able to open the scrolls. I mean, you just want to see that exaltation of Christ, the one we are serving. This is what leads us to persevere and not fall to the temptation of hanging out with Jezebel, right? Man, this is what keeps us going. But also from that is the fact that all the rest of the book flows out of this. And especially as we will see as we go on, but that is why the throne room is at the center. Now, the bigger question as we're zooming into structure here is, the seals, the trumpets, the bowls. There's 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls. The question for structure, anyway, is this is flowing out of the heaven, but is this a linear, like uninterrupted narrative that is flowing out of chapter 4, or is it 3 different recapitulations, all saying the same thing in different ways with perhaps different nuances or different emphasis? And for the most part, I would follow the latter, that this is not a linear, most in our circles would not hold to that view, but that would be more from a dispensational point of view. But it seems like it is possible that there is plot development, as my professor says. But for the most part, it is a recapitulation. So to show evidence of recapitulation, first of all how similar they all are, but also the poetic number 7, which is going along with chapter 1 and the 7 churches and just the importance of 7 throughout the Bible, the completeness. But also things like lightning and thunder coming from chapter 4, verse 5, that are also in the 7th part of each of these sections, chapter 8, verse 5, 11, 19, and 16, verse 18. Along with that is that it seems that the end of the world is depicted at the end of each one of these. This is from my professor, Dr. Rainbow, which gives a chart for all of that you can see on your outline. So it just, and 7, there's just so many similarities that it's just hard not to imagine that these are a recapitulation to some degree, most degree of the degree probably. However, on the other hand, my professor, I'm deriving from him a lot, and G.K. Beale and William Mounts, for the most part, they're all sitting on my desk right there. That's why I had to look. I was having a brain fart and who I was doing that. So I don't just know all this stuff. I'm just regurgitating things. I mean, there are things that I do know, but a lot of this is just a regurgitation of that. Dr. Rainbow, talks about how the storyline seems to be intensified as you go, especially deriving at the end with the bulls seems to be the most intense. And so there seems to be a plot development in intensity, at least, that prepares us for the final end of history. So that's we zoomed in on some structure. I don't have a ton of time to go into too much more than that. But now we're going to turn to the recipients. Now, as I said before, I believe that every word is inspired by God. I believe the genre is inspired by God. But I also believe that it is also inspired, that the author writes according to their time and culture, and is writing to those initial recipients of the letter, that audience. And so that is also inspired. So I believe the preferred way of doing hermeneutics and exegesis is to take that into account. And so we are to understand what the author says to the original audience. That is our goal, to find that. And that's how we understand the fullness of what is going on in any given book. Specifically for the book of Revelation, or the Apocalypse, means that all of the imagery, all of the symbols are therefore rooted in Asia Minor during the 1st century, or John's day, when this was written. That is not only true pertaining to the symbols and imagery that were specifically given for their time and place, but even future events and imagery pertaining to future events on different various places on planet Earth. All of those symbols and imagery were also rooted in their culture, in their time. I believe that is very crucial to understand, and that is why I do not believe that the mark of the beast is in any way, shape, or form a microchip, nor do I believe that the locusts in Revelation 9, verse 7 are actually helicopters, right? As exciting as these things may be, and they are very, I would say, irresponsible in interpreting the Bible, right? They may be good for writing a best-selling novel, but not actually gaining a full understanding of what the apocalypse is saying to us, or to John's original recipients. The temptation, however, in every generation and culture is to reset the visions and imagery and symbols of the apocalypse to take on meaning from our culture and our age, right? This is an ill-founded approach that reflects our human self-centered and fickle nature, that we think that we are the center of the universe and God was writing to 2020 in America, right? That's absurd. These are things rooted in their time and their culture. When read that way, we get the fullness of the meaning, and it is very relevant for us if we understand it correctly. However, things pertaining to craziness that has come from certain schools of thought are illegitimate. Now, the message of the apocalypse, I've already gone through some of this, but I have a fourfold approach. What all of the things that I've talked about thus far, things that are and things to come, to quote 119, I am not claiming that I have everything down perfectly. I am not claiming that I have room to grow. I am teachable. You can disagree with me. You can help refine me. You can whatever these things. So I don't claim to have this perfectly, but here is my how I believe the main gist of the message is. And I would say, if we get the main gist of the message correctly, we will be blessed by it. But number one, God is showing that as the latter days are here, the Son of Man, or the last Adam from Daniel 7 and Psalm 8, has come, and the kingdom is inaugurated on earth, and its inaugurated kingdom is to be carried out through the saints. Number two, as this is coming to fruition, there will not be a willful, easy transfer of power. Insert own joke about the presidential election. But it will not be an easy transfer of power from the world to Jesus and to the saints. There will be ongoing war and tribulation until the very end of history. Jesus, number three, Jesus will prevail through his church, and thus the call to give our lives to follow Jesus and not the world, not the beast, not the harlot, metaphorically speaking. And in the meantime, God's presence is with us to empower us to boldly live as a witness of King Jesus, even to the end of the age, to quote the Great Commission. And so there is my introduction to the apocalypse. I'm sure there are plenty more things that I didn't cover that you could all is fair game to ask about. So what I'm going to do, knowing that I don't have a ton of time, there's not a way possible that I could unpack every single verse, like I have done into those smaller epistles. So what I did, I chose the Son of Man passage in chapter 1, and then I'm going to rapid fire a whole bunch of stuff pertaining to the apocalypse, and then we will end spending some time in the millennial reign and the new heavens and new earth. So that's where we're going for the remainder of the lecture. So chapter 1, verse 9 through 20, I've already referred to this, so I'm not going to actually spend a ton of time on it, but I've already unpacked that this is the Son of Man from Daniel 7, which finds its origins in Psalm 8, and thus an echo even of the first Adam in Genesis. And so he is here. And so that is the big overarching picture of this section. But John is in prison. He is not just in prison, he's on an island in prison, right? You can't be any more like removed from civilization to be on a island prison. But what is perhaps ironic about the whole deal is that God is giving John, who is in prison on an island, he is giving him a vision of how the Son of Man has come. He has inaugurated his kingdom through his saints, and he is to be the mouthpiece, so to speak, to deliver this message while in prison, in a sense, captive by the world, held captive. And he's the one that is chosen to share this vision of the great apocalypse. And so it's just a rather almost humorous deal on how God works sometimes. But from prison, he is there, and you just imagine he's most likely by himself, perhaps some guards, and he hears this voice like a trumpet. It's very loud. And so of course, he's like, what in the world is this? This is before cell phones or auto, like speakers of any sort. And so he is wondering what in the world he is hearing. And so on turning, he sees this vision of the Son of Man. And so a lot of these things come from Daniel 7, this vision of the Son of Man. It's not just the Son of Man, that phrase, but a lot of the imagery comes from there. The robe, of course, comes from there. It's most likely kingly, but it very well could also be a priestly role. The golden sash is, of course, royal, but this probably is showing the kingly and priestly nature of Jesus. That he has. His head and hair were white as wool, like snow, which is also from Daniel. But interestingly, it's referring to God the Father in Daniel 7. So it's probably showing that Jesus is the ultimate image bearer, that he is the one coming from the Ancient of Days and thus reflects the Ancient of Days. And as we see in chapter 4, he is sharing in the sovereign reign of the Father as he sits at the right hand. I love how D.A. Carson puts it. He in a lecture one time, he said, well, he's got white hair, which is probably referring to his old age and wisdom, and perhaps the white is referring to a purity of his wisdom, because that's what is back there. But Carson goes, his hair may be white, but his eyes are still good. But they are a flame of fire, right? Referring to how he sees everything purely and perfectly, accurately. He doesn't missee. So therefore, he doesn't misperceive, we can even say. And so he sees what is going on in the churches perfectly. And he sees down to the depths of their hearts perfectly, which is also true, of course, for you and your church. And therefore, perhaps there is also an allusion to judgment. And so there will not be an unfair trial in the judgment. God sees perfectly. His feet are like bronze, having been fired in the furnace, probably referring to his moral uprightness. His voice is like the rush of many waters, which D.A. Carson interprets as the waters go everywhere. They are perhaps an allusion to Isaiah 55, where the rain and snow does not come down to the earth without watering it, giving it what it needs to bear fruit. It doesn't screw up before returning back to God, to paraphrase. And so perhaps that's what is in mind there. In his hands are the 7 stars, later identified as the 7 angels, which is very interesting because, every church is, it starts off to the angel of the church of Laodicea or Smyrna or Philadelphia, whatever. It's to the angel, right? And so some have suggested that it's referring to, angel can mean messenger. So perhaps it's referring to some sort of messenger, perhaps even like a pastor or something along those lines. But G.K. Beale points out that of the 60 times the word angel is used in the Apocalypse, never once is it anything but a celestial being or a heavenly angel being. And so that leads him to think, and I believe he's correct, that this is an angel. And so it seems to have this almost strange idea that there is an angel for every church, every legitimate lampstand with the light, the Holy Spirit in it. I'll get to that. But every one of these churches with the lamp that are a legitimate lampstand has an angel representative, right? As some sort of leader or representative. And perhaps it's showing how interconnected heaven really actually is with the church, even though it's unseen by even us and the world, at least in a physical sense, yet there is that connection there. I am definitely not going to break fellowship with anybody who disagrees or doesn't go with me on that one. That's just where I land right now on the angels. So all of that, I believe, has to do with showing how the Son of Man has come, what it means that prophecy in Daniel 7 has been inaugurated and that he is about to reign through the church. You see that. You can just read through the churches in chapters 2 through 3. You'll want a commentary, of course, and you want to take note of all the allusions to chapter 1 that take place in chapter 2 and 3. But all of that has to do with the coming Son of Man and his inaugurated kingdom through the saints. All right, so now we come to the moment in the lecture that this is the lightning round. This is a rapid fire round. So I'm just going to rapid fire through a whole bunch of stuff. It's not going to be satisfactory, but it's the best we can do in a one lecture on the book of the Apocalypse. And so I'm just going to rifle through a lot of this stuff. And of course, anything is fair game. If you raise an eyebrow to something, or you want more clarification, I'm hoping Ryan Franchuk will be there so he can actually tell you with confidence. So anyways, ready, set, go. Great Tribulation. 3.5 years, 42 months, 1,260 days, or my favorite, a times, time, and half a time. What the heck is that? Anyway, it's all pointing to the same thing. John is to this great tribulation. Now, I believe, like most everything else in this book, it's a symbol. It's a metaphoric, and so I don't believe in a tribulation to come that will, sun up on day 1 through sundown 1,260 days later will be how this works. If it is, I was wrong, and I'll admit it. But I believe that this is a metaphorical tribulation. In one sense, John says it's already begun. He says he's a partner in the tribulation in chapter 1, verse 9. Chapter 2, verse 9, it says, I know your tribulation. Do not fear how you are to suffer. Be faithful unto death. It doesn't really get a whole bunch more turbulent than that, right? But the idea of this tribulation comes from Daniel, where even there it seems to be different, where it's probably referring to 168 BC. And then also Jesus uses the same type of terminology to describe the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. 2 Thessalonians 2:7 and 1 John 2:18 seem to describe this tribulation as well, and saying it's already begun. Right, as there's Antichrist here. It's already the final hour, little children, right? And so it's already begun. But in both of those places, 2:7 and 2:18, and 1 John 2:18, seem to depict that there will be some sort of eschatological figure, Antichrist, man of lawlessness, whatever, that will be at the end of history, accompanied by the great tribulation at the end of history. And so I do leave out that even though we are in a metaphoric tribulation, that nonetheless there will perhaps be a final tribulation at the end of history, when whatever that means, that the man of lawlessness will be unrestrained and the final Antichrist comes, however way that works. 144,000. You have a Jehovah's Witness or somebody like that come to your door. You typically have that in mind, but surely a symbolic number. It's a cubicle, 12 by 12 by 1,000. Not a chance that that's literal. A number of from each tribe of ethnic Israel. Some have put forward that this is a military census. Very well could be, but nonetheless, it is a metaphorical 144,000. But the best option to understand this is the very next section of Revelation, where it talks about a myriad of people, a number that nobody could count, from every tongue, tribe, and nation. I believe that that's what it's referring to. It's a theological 144,000, a completeness of the true Israel. That comes to fruition as a number that no one can count, which is also a great missions passage, by the way. If you were ever in the market for needing a missions passage, that would be a great text to point to. Battle of Armageddon. Dang, that sounds cool. It sounds another hardcore band name. I'm probably already is one. But it only occurs here in Revelation chapter 16, verse 16. It typically is referred to as Megiddo, or however you say that, from Judges 5:19 and 2 Kings 23:29. But it's not a universal consensus on that. Meredith Klein, for example, claimed that it was Mount Sinai, which is kind of crazy. I have no idea. I didn't actually even read up on what that even refers to or how Meredith got there. Meredith is a dude, by the way, if you didn't know that. But I just bring that up to show that it's not a universal consensus that it is. The etymology of Armageddon is actually more ambiguous than what many. Okay, so I'm quoting Dr. Rainbow there. I should clarify there that the etymology is perhaps more ambiguous than what most commentators try to suggest. But at the end of the day, I mean, the big thing is that it seems like it's a huge battle at the end of history, and it's the world versus the saints, basically, as the Battle of Armageddon. Now, following of the things, I'm just going to continue rifle through a bunch of things that I love how my professor calls these counterfeits or counterparts to God and the Son of God and the church, right? They are a antithesis, but they are a faulty antithesis. They fall short. They are lesser than. So the dragon. The dragon is referring to the devil. God is the glorious and beautiful one in chapter 4, verse 3. Satan is a slimy monster with 7 heads and horns, or a slimy dragon with 7 heads and horns. The beast, if we remember, God reigns through Christ. So the dragon has one who does his bidding here on earth, and he is the great beast. Chapter 12, verse 17, 13, 1. Jesus comes from heaven. The beast comes from the sea, which in Revelation 21, in the new heavens and earth, the sea is no more, because this points to how evil, the sea represents evil. And there's all sorts of different passages and allusions that we can sift through that would take a long time. Suffice it to say, the beast comes from evil. Now, actually, I'll come back to pinpointing the beast. First, I'm going to also do the mark of the beast, just because I'm already on the subject of the mark of the beast. This is a antithesis to the 144,000. The beast wants his 144,000, so to speak. And so, there's a battle to slay all the true Israel. But also these people who, to trade and sell in the marketplace, to function in society, that they are trying to bring forth is marked by 666, right? This is, the alleged mark of the beast. Now, many things have been put forward to suggest that, this 666 is some sort of numerical understanding in Hebrew to point to Nero, which I would say is faulty. It is, I don't believe that, though if I'm wrong, then chalk another one wrong in the wrong column for Zach, right? Whatever. But to me, what seems to be best is to understand that 6 is 1 short of 7. I mean, we all know that, but we know that 7 is the poetic for completion and often attributed to God and creation, 7 days. And so 6 falls short. And so we can say 666 is falls short, falls short, falls short, which is a triad that mimics holy, 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 perhaps. So instead of being holy, 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 they are fall short, fall short, fall short, human, 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 perhaps even. And so I don't believe that we should necessarily even pinpoint a specific Nero or whoever else that some people have pointed out. I believe it's just theoretically the mark of the leader that's leading the antithesis to God. That would be how I would understand the beast and the mark of the beast. The harlot, or the prostitute on the waters and whatnot. Of course, she's not like hanging out in some inner tube or something on the waters, but or perhaps she was. I don't know, but I take it to be metaphorical. But it's referring to the Roman commercial society, the military, everything that it's referring to. It's the imagery of the harlot brings forth the imagery of seduction and people being lured into their culture and thus away from God. It's their culture is the antithesis to God's kingdom, and so it is enticing. The prophet is, or the prostitute is enticing, trying even to lure the God's elect. To quote the epistle that is. Now, in all these things, they are, a lot of the times these things are brought forth as they're referred to as Babylon. We see that come up a lot, or other Tyre, or other deceased nations. Is that how you would, nations that have fallen, right? And so why do they keep bringing them up? Well, of course, they were all enemies to Israel and thus to God. And so John, inspired by God, is giving us this illusion that, or this idea that these nations are representative of your current state that is antithesis to God and fighting against God. But as Babylon fell, right, the Persians defeated them, and so we know that they are able to fall. And so, like, it reminds us of Psalm 2. Why do the nations rage and plot in vain, right? The peoples of earth, align themselves against the Lord and the Lord's anointed. The Lord sits in heaven and laughs, right? Because he knows these nations will fall. So it seems that, whatever your beast is, your harlot is, whatever... it seems they are strong. It seems enticing. But at the end of the day, they will fall. And you will fall with them if you are enticed and grow connected to them. The rapture. Funny story about the rapture that I'll try to remember to tell you in the Zoom meeting pertaining to this. But, the word rapture is never used in the whole Bible, especially not in Revelation. But people have used chapter 3, verse 10, I'll keep you from the hour of trial. So, hey, that's meaning a pre-trib rapture, right? But the other churches aren't raptured. They have to go through it, remain and endure. So why would one, faithful church be raptured and not the other? Chapter 4, verse 1, some people have somehow used John being invited to come up into the heavens in the vision as a proof of rapture when it's just John and not the rest of the church, right? It's pretty faulty, if you ask me. I'm trying to remain humble. I'm sorry that I am arrogant. But even I've covered most, if not all, the other rapture text along the way. So I'm not going to labor that anymore. 2 witnesses in chapter 11. There is mention of the lampstands and the olive branch. The olive branch is a little bit more difficult because it hasn't been taken up as much, but probably some sort of temple priestly thing, but the lampstands, right? We've already seen that they're the churches. But why is it 2 and not 7? Well, the best idea that I have is that there were 2 faithful churches, right? We have Smyrna and Philly. They were the ones that were faithful in the descriptions in chapter 2, verse 3. So I don't believe that it is just specifically those 2 churches, but those 2 churches represent all of the faithful churches that are in the world. They are the witness. And there's so much more to go into that one. It's kind of a complicated one, but that'll at least get you a good start on interpreting that. Okay, that was the lightning round. I hope nobody was keeping score. I probably didn't do so hot, but nonetheless, we're going to tackle the millennium and the millennial reign, and then the new heavens and earth, and then we are done. So I know I didn't cover so many things, but nonetheless, there's just not time. Perhaps somebody someday will teach a whole course on the book of Revelation, and I hope that someone isn't me. But nonetheless, we come to this, and if you think that I'm going to give you the golden nugget to end all the debates over the millennial reign, you are rudely mistaken. If you think you have the golden nugget and are going to end all debates during Zoom, we have bigger issues at hand that we need to take care of. But here's how I want to start. We have holy, holy, holy. We have 666. Now I want to say humble, humble, humble. Is the good TPA student, right? We all, and teachers and professors, by the way, we want to be humble about this. This has been dividing the church for eons. We are not going to fix it today. To think you have the golden nugget is fool's errand. However, we're going to do whatever good we can here. Chapter 2, verse 1 through 3, we have the infamous binding of Satan. Now, so the idea is he's bound in the abyss, he's shackled, he's tethered, there's a seal, there's lock and key, he's in there, right? But then John qualifies it by so that he does not deceive the nations, that ancient serpent, right? So at bare minimum, we can say that this is the ancient serpent of old from Genesis 3 who crept into the Garden of Eden and deceived Eve. Now he is tethered so that he can't accomplish Genesis 3 again, or at least during this 1,000-year reign. And so then it depends on how literal you take the binding of Satan here. Is he really in this pit, in this abyss with this lock and key seal? And if so, then passages like 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8, the devil prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour, right? That can't take place during the millennial reign if you take a very literal view of the binding of Satan. And so this would be, typical of premillennialists and dispensationalists alike, that they would take more of a literal view of this, and so that they would not believe that the devil will be prowling around. He's under lock and key, he's tethered completely. Where others who take a more metaphorical understanding of this would say the main thing is the main thing is that he can't deceive the nations to the degree that global missions will take place. Revelation 7 is going to happen, right? And so the devil has been tethered to the degree that he cannot keep Revelation 7. Saw a myriad of people, a number that no one can count, from every tongue, tribe, and nation. That would be the other end of the spectrum in interpreting this text. Now, for me, I think about, of course, in Matthew, where Jesus says, I broke into the house and bound the strong man, right? It's, very similar language here. And there, Jesus meant that he broke into the strong man's house, bound him to the degree that he could cast out demons. And I also think it's implied to heal the sick, cause the lame to walk, raise the dead even. All of that is because he's already broken in. He's defeated Satan. He's at least bound him so that he can clean up shop. He is, and it's an imagery really pointing to how the kingdom of God has re-entered in, and the gates of hell are not going to be able to prevail against him because he's already bound the strong man. He's already bound Satan. Now, I do not believe, as some do, and even as I used to, that is the dawn of the millennial reign. I don't believe that, but here, go with me on this. You don't have to agree with me, but just follow my logic here. That Jesus, not only is the last Adam, but he acts as like this micro Israel, right? And we know that there's types of things that, like, Jesus is the temple, Israel or the church is the temple, and things pertaining to that. But consider after Jesus is baptized, he goes into the wilderness for 40 days. Right, that of course correlates to Israel in the wilderness for 40 years, but what 40 years was 40 days. Jesus is like this micro Israel to a micro true church of God, the true Israel. And so he's pointing to that. So is it possible that Jesus is describing his micro millennial reign. He had his own personal millennial reign during his life. That is how I would view it, and so it's a metaphorical 1,000-year reign for Jesus when he bound Satan. And I believe that Satan was prowling around like a roaring lion, seeking to deceive, to destroy Jesus. He entered into Judas. Right. And so he was bound, but not bound to the extent, even though the vivid language of being bound, like he's wrapped up. He can't stop the robber from breaking into the house, pilfering the house. But yet he was able to enter into Judas, but he could not stop Jesus from atoning sins. Right. And so if we take that same logic, I believe that, of course, I'm an amillennialist, so I believe that we are in the millennial reign. And so Satan is currently bound to the extent, the vivid language is only to the extent of preventing Satan from deceiving the nations and prohibiting global missions. Again, we want to be humble. I am humble, and I am very adamant to say that I could be totally wrong and missing everything. Ryan will agree. But nonetheless, that is how I interpret these things. For a premillennial understanding, you would understand that this is still something to come. It has not begun yet, and whatnot. But that was, that's, I guess, getting ahead of myself, but this is pertaining to the binding of Satan. Chapter 20, verse 4 through 6. Now, what this binding of Satan seems to be what enables the events of verse 4 through 6. So if we're not on the same page on verses 1 through 3, we're not going to start off on the same page, and we are surely not going to end on the same page on verses 4 through 6. So we've already veed off a little bit, and I don't expect us to be on the same page for this, because I don't expect us all to be on the same page for the binding of Satan. But nonetheless, verse 4 through 6, this bizarre passage, regardless if you're a premillennialist or amillennialist, it's a bizarre idea that these, I would call them disembodied souls, come to life, and they reign with Christ seated on the throne. There is just all sorts of debate over this, as there is in everything in Revelation. But man, this is a doozy. The first question is this on earth or is it in heaven? Is it a bodily resurrection or a spiritual resurrection? Why in the world is it just martyrs? Why not all? And why are the others not brought back to life at this point? And I thought that the Bible always talked about one resurrection, or at least in a global sense at the end of the age, this one resurrection. This seems to be describing multiple resurrections. So what in the world is going on? Well, I'm not going to suffice anybody, I'm sure, but premillennialists would take the view that this is on earth, that these are bodily resurrection. The word for resurrection, it's the only time it appears here, I believe, in Revelation, but everywhere else, this word is used to describe a bodily resurrection. So they would say, well, that ought to be true here. It's a bodily resurrection. They have come back to life. They are reigning with Christ on earth. And this is what is happening during the time that in the future that Satan is bound. They are reigning and experiencing all of that until the serpent is released in the next section. We'll get to there in due course. On the other hand, which is where I would be, the other hand, I do not believe that what premillennialists claim is anywhere close to a nail in any coffin, to use a very morbid imagery there. But the structure of the passage, as my professor called it, I don't know if he coined this or if somebody else did. I don't know if anybody else has ever heard of an interpretive gloss, but this is what he claims. He says in his book, I believe he's correct, A equals B. right? So this is not algebra. This is theology and biblical interpretation, but A equals B. That is, the symbol is A, and the referent, or what the symbol stands for, is B. We see this all over the apocalypse, right? The lampstands, A, is B, the church, right? The A stars are the B angels, right? This is the interpretive gloss. A equals B. And so here, the disembodied souls of the martyrs coming to life, I believe they're very much disembodied souls coming to life, to reign with Christ for 1,000 years, is A, the symbol. Right? As vivid of imagery as it is the symbol. This is the interpretive gloss. So that is A. So what is the referent? The first resurrection. So whatever A is referring to equals B, whatever the first resurrection is. Now, I've also already said that premillennialists will boast of this word for resurrection as only meaning bodily resurrection everywhere else, but never in any of those places is it qualified by first. I believe that is key. That is very critical to everything. First is antithesis to first death. And it implies a second resurrection and thus a second death. We already know about the second death, but it implies a second death. Why else would he call it a first resurrection? And so if there is a first resurrection, what is that? And if there's a second resurrection, what is that? Well, first, I think about this in terms of first and second. What came to my mind was when Jesus says, "Do not fear man, for all they can do is kill your body. Fear God, who can kill your soul in hell," right? And this is the second death, the lake of fire, the second death, right? And so what would be the complement to that? And I believe it would be a spiritual resurrection and then a bodily resurrection. I understand that premillennialists don't buy this view from us Ammies. I'm calling us amillennialists Ammies. But we tend to say, preemies, man, come on. This is the only place where this type of, metaphor, whatever it is, 1,000-year reign exists. Like, there's nothing close. Or this resurrection, this multiple resurrection, man, it's always, right? Like, Christ comes, there's a resurrection, right? And so, and they would say, well, there's only one place where it talks about a new covenant, in Jeremiah 31, of course, but there's all sorts of places that makes you like, oh yeah, I can see that. And there's nothing in the Bible that talks about anything hinting at a millennial reign that's somewhere in the future where this bodily resurrection is, or this first bodily resurrection, right? So I am sorry that I'm getting a little carried away and not being overly humble. I can be very much sinful like that, but let me just say, like, it fits so much nicer if we say that this is a metaphorical symbol referring to the first spiritual resurrection. It fits so much nicer with the whole of the Bible, and I don't believe it is mishandling Revelation 20 if we understand first resurrection as being qualifying it as a spiritual resurrection. So that is my that's what I believe this is referring to. I'm sure not everybody will go with me on that, but just wanted somebody to give an amillennial point of view on this. And then chapter 27 through 10, the very end of history, we finally get a full resurrection with judgment. I think that's a much more clear second resurrection. It's coming right after the first one. But here we have this. We can all kind of believe together that there will be some sort of unleashing of the devil, and he's going to wage war against the saints, and eventually it's a very anticlimactic ending, right? Like, they're waging war, they're about to attack, right? Because he's just deceived the nations. And who are these people if they were all destroyed in Revelation 19, by the way? All right, that's a side question. Obnoxious side question. But he's mounting this battle, and they're encroached, they're at hand, and then fire comes from heaven and destroys them, and it's over. right? It's like there's no dramatic fight at the end, right? Like if Hollywood got a hold of this, of course there would be this big fight at the end. But no, it's just fire comes down from heaven like Elijah's sacrifice, and it's done. Throw him into the lake of fire, and final judgment happens. Boom, done. The only real question, though, where we would, I mean, obviously, in terms of range of where this happens historically would be different, but who are the saints? As a good amillennialist, I believe this is just the remaining saints. It's not referring to those who experienced the first resurrection. This is those who are left on earth. This isn't those who have already deceased. And premillennialists would I assume, believe that this is the saints, and implied the risen Christ would be amongst them as they are mounting the attack. It seems very bizarre to me that would be the case. Seems way more natural to understand this as being the saints that have not deceased yet and still thus in the flesh on earth. Regardless, we can all hug each other, give fist bumps, whatever COVID-friendly love, if we disagree on the millennial reign. But nonetheless, that is how I understand it. Then we get to the new heavens and new earth. And as we consider that all of this is stemming from the inaugurated fulfillment of Daniel 7, here we finally come to the consummated fulfillment of everything. What is the mission of the Son of Man, the mission of the reign of the church, the mission of the kingdom, of what has been inaugurated in Daniel 7. Finally, we see the fruition of it. This is the end goal. This is the end of everything, the new heavens and new earth. So, of course, that is depicted from Genesis 1, where God created the heavens and the earth. This is the new heavens and new earth, and new is referring to more like restored and redeemed and whatnot. I love C.S. Lewis in Last Battle, right? When they're going into the Aslan's country, it's like, man, this is Narnia, because it looks, you see the mountains over there, Cair Paravel's over there, but it just seems like this is the real Narnia, and that was not the real one. This is the real, and I think that's a really great depiction of how we are to understand this. Now, the new Jerusalem, restored, redeemed Jerusalem, comes down out of heaven. As we also see, this comes from Isaiah 52, where Jerusalem is, they're still in exile at this point, but they're described as shaking off their shackles and putting on beautiful garments, and referring to wedding garments. And so this is a picture of Jerusalem coming down out of heaven. Some would point to the fact that no, Isaiah is referring to coming out of exile, where I would say, yes, it's just not the exile you're talking about. It's they came out of exile physically, but they didn't come out of exile spiritually. Finally, we come fully out of exile in the new heavens and the new earth. Now, for those who believe in a third temple, they would use chapter 21, verse 10 through 21, as far as it goes, to describe this final third temple. And of course, it comes from the prophecies of Ezekiel 40 through 48 and a few other places. But it is obviously not a physical temple. And here we want to try to out-literal them. Totally ripped that off of G.K. Beale. Because in chapter 21 verse 9, it says, the angel says, "Come, let me show you the wife, the bride of the Lamb." So if you take the angel for what he says, and you take that literally, he is going to show them the wife, the bride of the Lamb. He is not going to show them a third temple, or at least a physical temple. And then what does he show them? He shows them the final temple. All right, he gives them the dimensions coming from Ezekiel 40 through 48. Actually, it's 4 square, which is only the Holy of Holies is 4 square. So it's the Holy of Holies, at least, of the temple. But this isn't referring to a physical temple. It's referring to how Paul and others and Jesus referred to himself and the church as a temple. Right, so if you recall 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 4 through 9, the living stones being built upon the cornerstone, Jesus Christ, right? We are not fully fashioned in this life, but it's the building project of what we see in 21. This is the final, the building project is done. It's complete, and it is beautiful, having the glory of God, its radiance like a most rare jewel, like jasper, clear as crystal, right? Man, that's what suffering produces in you, right? That's what sanctification is producing in you, right? This is, this becoming more pure, to become more like Christ, to be this temple. The end goal is to, the end of what God does will be clear as crystal. It's a good thing to tell your people. The people of your church, that this is the beauty of what God is producing in you. Man, some of these things suck, man. It's hard. You probably shouldn't say that from the pulpit, but it's really hard. They hurt. It's bad. But nonetheless, God works all things for good, man. Here's proof. Makes us clear as crystal, like jasper, right? And so those who are looking for a third physical temple also stop too soon, because right after this section, in verse 22, it says, I saw no temple. What did you just show us if you saw no temple? And I believe this is the only place where temple is meant to be understood in a literal physical sense. I saw no physical temple there. But what did he see? He saw the Holy of Holies, which is us, but he saw the temple, which was God the Father and the Lamb, the Son, Jesus Christ. And so we are all so interconnected. All things have been subjected under Christ. And so thus we are this temple, and we are in the new heavens and earth, and we are the temple connected to Christ and the Father. And so we are all interconnected, and thus we are dwelling together. Behold, the dwelling place of God is now with man, right? And all things are made new. He wipes every tear from our eye, and obviously sin is there no more. Death is not there no more. There's a list of things that always gets me, because it says the cowards. Right? Is that I don't remember which verse that is, verse 7 or something. The cowards will not be in the new heavens and new earth, right? And I think if you just read chapters 2 through 3, you get a good picture on what that is referring to. But then in chapter 22, we verses 1 through 4, we get the garden, right? And it's very tempting to say, oh, the Garden of Eden regrew. And you can say, okay, sure, but this garden has exponential growth. Right? For example, the tree of life, which is just a singular tree in the Garden of Eden in Genesis 1 and 2, or in Genesis chapter 2 and 3, is now on both sides of the river. It's interesting because it's singular tree of life, and it's on both sides of the river. Probably more meaning is like, if there's a bowl of fruit, do you say the fruits bowl or the fruit bowl? Or it could be that it's a representative. The tree of life is representative of this forest of tree of life. And why did this happen? The river flows from the throne of God, out of his sanctuary. It's a living river. And this river finds, we understand this river from Ezekiel 47. I don't remember exactly which verse, but it says this river is fresh water, and like basically everything it touches, it gives life. Right, and this actually is borrowed from Psalm 1, this tree, and it's by the streams of water. And you think of just that it's an agricultural thing, but in Psalm 47, it's definitely quoting Psalm 1 to show that this is actually referring to the tree of life. We are like trees of life planted by streams of water. Right, everything it touches, it gives life. So it gives us the fruit in due season, and the leaves are for the healing of the nations. Right, there's a whole forest. That is how plentiful. This river is just so potent. That comes from God. It gives life, just abundant life in the new heavens and new earth. Exponential growth of the new heavens and new earth. And this is the final dwelling place of God with man, where the fullness of the fruition of the Daniel 7 prophecy will finally be fully realized in the new heavens and the new earth. And that is the goal of all things. That is why we persevere. That is why we endure. That's why we preach and teach our hearts out. That's why you endure Greek and Hebrew. That's why you endure the TPA. And that's why we make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that he has commanded us. So we know he's with us to accomplish this, right? That's the end of all things. And so I want to end with how I began. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and keep what is written in it, for the time is near. Right? Not just a plain reading of the words, but these words ought to impact us. They're to shock us. They are to awaken our souls, awaken our ears to the realities of all from God in this apocalypse, right? No matter how strong the world seems to be, no matter how enticing the whore of culture seems to be, no matter how big things seem to be in front of us, the Son of Man has come. He is in the midst of the lampstands. He is sovereign over all things. He will prevail. He has prevailed, and he will empower us to prevail. We are to conquer, empowered by him. And the end goal, regardless of when the millennial reign will be or how it will take out, this dwelling place of God will finally be with man. That is why we are blessed. And so with that, I'm done. I'm actually going to go eat Papa John's to the glory of God in celebration that this is over. But nonetheless, I love you guys and can't wait to have a final with you and hear all these things. I'm just so grateful to be a part of this program and to be a part of this ongoing endeavor to bring forth the end of the ages with the new heavens and new earth. And I am so happy to be co-laborers with you. And so to that end, God bless.